Hello, I'm Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Today is January 8th, 2026. Here we are in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill in the Capitol Recording Studio. And with me today is my esteemed colleague from the great state of Louisiana, representing Louisiana's 6th Congressional District, Congressman Cleo Fields.
Good to be with you, Brother Jackson.
Great to see you. And we are also co-chairs of the Congressional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Caucus, which we started just over a year ago, 1 week after we sat in the rotunda and saw the inauguration of President Trump. We saw the vicious attack on diversity, equity, inclusion, and we knew what this would mean. Now, 1 year later, as we preview and review what happened last year and what's going to happen this year, we also have with us today Attorney Darrell Jones. Thank you so much, civil rights attorney, outstanding, and his colleague and our friend and civil rights lawyer and champion, Barbara Arnwine. We're going to talk about what to expect in this Voting Rights Act that is now being challenged. And this is Congressman Cleo Fields' seat in so many ways has been responsible, seeking maximum representation, seeking opportunities for all people in Louisiana and across the nation to be fairly represented. If we aren't at the table, then our votes simply don't count. We have to get to the table. Congressman Cleo, a dear friend and brother of mine, I guess we started on this some 30 plus years ago.
Some years ago.
And here you are back. Can you give us a little bit of a background, how you first got to Congress, at what age, what happened, and how you got back to the Congress?
Well, actually I started in Congress in '93. And I was a member of the state Senate.
You started in '93?
Yes.
So how old were you?
I was 29. And I started in Congress. Actually, I was I was chairman of the redistricting committee. And at that time, Louisiana only had one African-American seat. And I worked with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, and we were determined to create a second seat because in Louisiana has a large African-American population. Over 30% of the constituency or the people in Louisiana are African-American. And at that time we had actually 7 members of Congress. Now we have 6. And we created the seat and they filed a lawsuit against it. And I always, tell people, I've never served a single day in Congress and having not been challenged in the Supreme Court. And it's like deja vu. Here we go again. I was chairman of the committee year ago, and I created the second district. And now, the seat is up for, discussion in the Supreme Court. And I'm optimistic. Lawyers like Barbara. Barbara was on this battle long time ago. And the people of Louisiana, this is nothing new to us. And, we've had challenges like this before, and we expect the Supreme Court to uphold the seat because there's no other way, there's no other just way to do it but to uphold it. But yeah, that's my bio.
So let me ask you, what's on the Supreme Court's docket? What could happen tomorrow for our viewers?
Well, we are very concerned that the Supreme Court could actually issue an opinion tomorrow that would adversely affect the Voting Rights Act. There are levels to what the decision can do. It could be...
And so the name of the case is?
It's called Louisiana versus Calais.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a very critical case. It is probably the most important case for African-American political power.
So what are the plaintiffs saying about the case? Why did they bring the case? Why did the Supreme Court hear the case?
The Supreme Court heard the case because of its own ideological leanings, that there are people on the court who just basically have been opposed to the Voting Rights Act for decades, and have said it. And this is not something I'm putting in their mouths. They have said that if they had their own way, the act wouldn't exist. So we have a threat that in this case, they're challenging the redistricting. They're saying that it's a racial gerrymander to the detriment of non-blacks, which is how they categorize themselves, and they're saying that this second congressional district should not exist. But that's not all that they're doing. They're saying any, their arguments are broad. They're saying any predominantly minority district, whether black, Native American, Asian, Latino, should not exist. That they're all, quote, unconstitutional and violative of the 14th Amendment. They're also arguing that the Voting Rights Act itself is unconstitutional. Although it's been, in law for 60 years, 61, right, now that we're in 2026, and saying that the act, it's not needed anymore, that we're so racially equal in voting and in all our politics and in all our life operations in our nation, that you don't need anything to protect against this kind of discrimination because it just doesn't exist anymore. So they make all these specious arguments.
So white plaintiffs came forward
Yes.
as the plaintiffs,
Yes.
saying because this district has racial consideration, since a community has been historically denied, excluded, now it's at their detriment. They've been discriminated against it. Or correct me.
Let's take a step back. Why is there a second congressional district that was created? It was created because black plaintiffs went to court and fought in the federal courts to prove that there was racial discrimination by the Louisiana state legislature in drawing up their maps for Congress, that they had used racially discriminatory criteria, racially discriminatory actions to the detriment of African Americans, so they couldn't get a fair opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice. And because of that, they won that lawsuit after years of litigation. And the minute they won, the other lawsuit was filed.
So before I ask you a question, Daryl, Congressman Fields, in order for this seat to have been created, you had to go before the supermajority in the Louisiana state legislature. You have 2 Republican United States senators. You've got 5 more at that time United States congressional people. You got your state house, the state reps. Everyone in Louisiana is clear that there's been a history or pattern of racial discrimination. And they all passed it. How extraordinary is this for the federal courts to step in and intervene after the state said it passed the test?
Well, by a majority Republican legislature and by a Republican governor, look, if you
so they're
tell
clear
me,
there's racial history.
Yeah, look, the whole purpose of the Voting Rights Act was to protect people like me who lived in states like Louisiana and Mississippi, because although we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, states like Louisiana and Mississippi, southern states, they said, we don't care about no federal law. You have the right to vote, but we also have the right to say you got to have a literacy test to come and register to vote. And so they had all these draconian laws and rules and regs to prohibit people from even registering to vote. They didn't even want people, poll taxes, all kinds of. And so there came the voting rights 61 years ago. They passed it. And and even then we still had a lot of obstacles. If you tell me, Jonathan, that I got to jump a certain height, I could probably do that. I could say that's fair. If you tell me I got to run, a certain speed, I probably can do that. But if you tell me I got to be white to serve in Congress, there's nothing I can do about that. I need some help from my government, and that's why the Voting Rights Act was even implemented. In Louisiana, the fact of the matter, we've never had a black person, to be elected in a majority white district in Congress, not one, in the history of Louisiana. And it probably is true in most southern states. Louisiana need the protections of the Voting Rights Act. The record is very clear. Louisiana's population is over a third black. Louisiana population is compact enough to create a second majority black district. And if you want to do an eyeball test, the reason why the district looks the way it looks it wasn't because of race, it was because of politics. You know, it was the politics of the Louisiana legislature that drove the district to look the way it looks. We have one female member of Congress. The Louisiana legislature said, we want to protect that member. You know, we have the Speaker of the House, you know, Louisiana legislature, hey, we can't bother the Speaker of the House. We also have the majority leader. We can't bother him either. So they drew the district, you know.
Creatively.
Yeah, creatively. And, you know, I really don't think the Supreme Court is going to involve itself. You know, we have complied with all of the rules of jingles. I mean,
Yes.
we have really, you know, done everything the Supreme Court told us we had to do. And race was not the predominant factor in the creation of this district. And I think they're going to rule that way. Will it come tomorrow? You know, perhaps. But whenever it comes, and I think that's why they punted last time, because to actually disturb this district, you can't do it without just deleting the Voting Rights Act.
Upending
Subsection
districts
2.
all across the nation.
And I don't think the Supreme Court is going to do that. And you know, I just think they're boxed, and they're going to have to rule that the district is constitutional.
Brother Darrell, your opinion on this. What are you concerned about for a potential ruling in this Louisiana case tomorrow? The pros, the cons.
Yeah, thank you for that, Congressman, and thank Congressman for all that he's done from Louisiana and moving forward and standing on the issue. You know, one of the big things and one of the big concerns that comes out of this case, out of the Calais case, is that should Calais be decided in a manner that impacts the African American ability to elect folks throughout the South, because that's where their primarily concern is, throughout the South. We're looking at, from the state legislative stance, 191 different state legislative districts that could be impacted by that.
Yes.
And what happens from that? Well, it's the state legislatures that do the process of doing all the redistricting, of deciding how the district should look. So if you have 191 Black and Latino legislators that are removed as a result of what the Supreme Court decides, that's going to have a direct impact as to whose voice is at the table. Not who has a seat at the table, but whose voice is at the table. What the Voting Rights Act was designed to do was to be certain that there were certain voices that were heard, that there were not hurdles that were put up to stop those voices from making it to the table. What the Calais decision has the potential to do is to now remove those voices from that table, so that those concerns, those issues are not presented. But it doesn't stop there just on the state legislative side. It also has the impact on the congressional side. We know of immediately 19 members of Congress that are African American that would immediately be challenged under this new decision, and that the districts would be redrawn. It doesn't stop there. It goes all the way down to local county council positions. It goes down to school board positions. All of those things would be impacted by this Calais decision, and has the potential to be, detrimentally impacted in communities of color. So that's the reason that we're pushing for people to be aware of it, to know what it's about, to understand what's at issue and what's not at issue. And sometimes Barbara and I are both attorneys. We speak in this legalese. I try to break it down when I was in law school preparing for the bar, they said, the best way to explain something is like you're talking to somebody that's at a bar, right? So, the way that we try to break it down is to say this, that if your issue is access to SNAP, and you want someone, a representative, that shares your interest, that shares your community's interest, then you've got to be concerned about how they draw the lines as to who's voting. Because if your vote is so depleted that the impact of it doesn't allow you and doesn't allow the community to elect someone that represents the community's thoughts, the community's philosophies, the community's approach, then your voice has been lost and your issue is not going to be heard, at least not in the way that you'd like it to.
So I tell you, one of the things that draws me to Congressman Fields, we've been lifelong friends, is in many ways we share the same vein in American life on Interstate I-55. It runs just a few miles from my house on the south side of Chicago, all the way straight through southern Illinois, parts of Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and ends up between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So when Cleo would come up, he could drive students up on one bus lane all the way up through to the heart of Chicago. In many ways, after the great flood and the levees broke and there was a great migration, people had to take that I-55. And what hits me about Congressman Fields, then he was a state senator, and he was the first and the youngest person I knew that was running for Congress. He was 29, and we were talking. I'm like, why do you want to do that? That was the last thing on our mind in our generation. But he had a commitment then to civil rights, has always maintained it on his voting rights efforts. And now, fast forwarded, Congressman Fields, I think people have to understand, was had this district redrawn after it was successfully created to maximize the voice of people in Louisiana. A Ku Klux Klansman, devout, accredited and certified, David Dukes, challenged Congressman Fields, what was that now, 20-some years ago?
Yes.
28 years.
And so a sitting Ku Klux Klansman took his case to the United States Supreme Court. And now Congressman Fields went through the channels, did everything right. The state legislature signed it, agreed to it, passed it. Now there's another group out of Louisiana. In Louisiana, we can credit them with a lot of firsts. Plessy versus Ferguson, that started the segregation, throwing people off the bus and off the train that had a full fare ticket. How do you measure black? The one drop rule.
Yes.
Louisiana is very creative when it comes down to racial politics. Congressman Fields, what do you want to say about
and thus,
Louisiana?
that there lies why we need the Voting Rights Act. There are people in states like Louisiana, black people, who need the protections. I mean, when they did away with subsection 5, that was a disaster. You know, when I first
And what
came
does subsection 5 mean?
Section 5, everything in the southern states, every time you pass a law that affects people's voting rights, you have to have it pre-cleared by the United States Department of Justice. And that's the way we created the seat, 32 years ago. Because the legislature didn't willingly create the seat. We created, we filed lawsuits, and then when they created the seat that didn't include a second majority black district, it had to be pre-cleared. And the Justice Department then said, you know what, we're not going to pre-clear this. Y'all, you have the population, there are bills that were introduced, and look at them, and then they passed the bill. Without those protections, and so they did away with Section 5. Now all we have left is Section 2, the dilution. And that's what the civil rights community has been dependent on. You find a southern state that have elected a black member of Congress. You find a southern state that have elected, Supreme Court justices. Those states need the protection of the Voting Rights Act. And that's all we have left. If you do away with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, these state legislatures and city councils and, and police, they're going to go in immediately and eliminate seats.
Right.
So we were at the Supreme Court case on October 15th, and we sat there, and I've just been very much alarmed that it's going by so quietly. And that's why we've reached out to Daryl and to Barbara to share with us, why mainstream media doesn't make this a headline news. Is there a bigger story that you can think of right now that will affect generations of African Americans?
Yeah, there's not a bigger story that's going to affect generations of African Americans.
But is that hyperbole, or is that like?
No,
not
real.
Not at all. Because
convince me why.
I think the thing that we've got to and folks need to appreciate is that the Voting Rights Act is what, 60? It'll be 61 in August, right? 60 years old, hasn't quite reached the 61st birthday. The impact that it has had, right, has been what, maybe 3 generations? Maybe 3 generations, and now you're beginning to see a lot of the fruit that it's bearing. The decision that this court is making today, and let's be clear, this U.S. Supreme Court, and I appreciate Congressman Fields' position and optimism with regard to the court. Through my eyes, this court, and through the eyes of the Brennan Center, this is the most conservative U.S. Supreme Court since 1935. Okay, so I do not anticipate them to act like they're in 2026. You know, I do not anticipate that they're going to be as optimistic in protecting all voters as they should be. So, you know, when we talk about the gravity of the decision that's about to be made for the African American community, you know, this court is getting ready to make a decision that will determine what representational government is going to look like, how tax dollars are going to be spent by these representatives. You know, we're going to be electing folks, and in the African American community, we'll be trying to elect people. Will be a majority, perhaps, of some areas. They'll be able to crack them apart, separate those communities into different districts to dilute their voting strength, and then not care about their issues because they won't have the votes to be able to put anybody in office that goes against what the majority wants. So when we talk about the significance of this case is so incredibly significant because it has the ability to silence a group of voters that exists across this country that have fought so hard and so valiantly to pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act and to have it renewed periodically.
So thank you so much, Dale. Barbara, let me ask you this here. I've tried to describe this as for the Students for Fair Admissions, a case that was wrongly decided.
Yes.
I said that was a tremor, if you will. That was a minor cloud with a little bit of rain in it. This is the storm cloud. That's a hailstorm. This is the earthquake. And to the degree that it's a federal case and they reinterpret this law on Louisiana versus Calais, this starts in the states. If we can't draw the maps in the states, you definitely can't make it to the Congress when they go through all the gerrymandering and redistricting.
Yes.
How was the Students for Fair Admissions wrongly decided, and how is that momentum playing into this case? Why should we be alarmed? If you agree that this is something that is one of the most monumental cases that's going on, that's going to impact generations of African Americans.
Well, they're going to do all kind of sleight of hand. They're going to claim, of course, that this is, as they did in SFFA, they're going to claim that this is a colorblind, race-neutral decision. When it's all about race, when it's all about putting their fingers on the scales.
The language is
and
trickery.
tipping it. Oh, yes. I mean,
If it's race, they say it's not race.
Right. It's very deceptive, right? And so we have to be very conscious of it. I mean, what I want everybody to understand is that the decision affects the whole nation, potentially, depending on how they write it, right? And it can be, everybody in this country will be affected by this decision. Because you take away the brilliance of a Cleo Fields, you take away his representative power. Today we just had that vote on the ACA. Every single person who voted on that was important to everybody in this country. There's not, you can't say, oh, only Californians. No, everybody in this country was affected by that vote. But you take away that representation, people who care about their constituents and not about the folks who got the money, those in power, who aren't, bowing down to the president, who will stand up for their people. You take away those voices and you have nothing. You'll have all these people and you've seen them crying on social media. My health care premium was $400. It's now $1,400. I need my medical coverage or I will die. And they're crying. But if you are from a district, or you think in your mind that you don't care about those people, then all of us suffer. So it's not that it's only our one member of Congress that we send to represent us. It's all of the Congressmen people who come together and constitute the body that makes the difference for all of us. So this is a national seismic wave, and we need to watch it. We need to be conscious of it. I want to implore everybody listening and watching today to make sure that you are on the outlook for what the outcome of this case is, and look to groups like ours, the NAACP, LDF, Lawyers Committee, ACLU, Center for Legal Campaign, all of these. We want people to all be aware that we will be fighting for you. because it's not going to be just one decision and then everything's over. This will will be a ripple effect of many other cases that will have to be litigated. But the most important thing is that the people need to be educated. They need to know what's happening.
So how can people reach you?
Oh, they can reach us. I can be reached at the best way to reach me is tjcoalition.org. That's our website, tjcoalition.org, and it's for Transformative Justice Coalition.org. And we want you to be in touch with us because we put out a newsletter. Electronic newsletter with all kind of information. We will be explaining this case. We're going to have town halls. We're going to be talking to Daryl, to the churches. We're going to be talking to the labor unions. We're going to be talking to the teachers. We're going to be talking to everybody about what this means, because without a fight, if there's no struggle, there's no progress.
So
And,
let me ask one
let's just
thing.
be real.
Brother Daryl,
We gotta
what
fight.
cases are up and coming that we should be concerned about? This is only the first shoe that drops.
Yeah, well, this is the first shoe that drops. There are some other cases that are coming up. One of the cases that's going to be heard from the Supreme Court is going to be dealing with the issue of standing and whether or not the ACLU, the NAACP, all these other organizations that are voting rights group, whether or not they even have standing to sue when they're
Back
violations.
to habeas corpus.
That
This
was
is back to
courthouse
Phyllis
court.
Wheatley.
So, I mean, that's going to be a major issue because if these organizations can't sue
Explain
on
that
voting-
case that's up and coming.
Yeah, I mean, what the case in essence is about is whether or not organizations such as the NAACP, such as the Legal Defense Fund, will they have standing to be able to bring lawsuits that allege violation of voting rights under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, if it should continue to exist after tomorrow. So in order for someone to bring a suit to say, my rights have been violated, someone has to initiate that suit. Ordinarily, organizations such as Black Voters Matter, TJC, Rainbow Push, whoever it is, will start and do that lawsuit and push it forward. What is now happening and what the Supreme Court is going to be deciding is whether or not they should have the ability to do that. Should the only entity that has the ability to have standing to bring suit to challenge violations of the Voting Rights Act, should that be the U.S. Attorney General? Should that be the Department of Justice? That's what they want. It's only for Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice to be able to bring lawsuits that are challenging cases that have gone against voting rights, right? The Voting Rights Act and people's access to being able to vote. What that would mean is that if the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, did not want to bring cases because, let's say, in Missouri there was a noose that was found at a polling site to intimidate Black voters from going in to vote, saying don't hang, you don't go here and vote, you blah blah blah. The only entity that would be able to challenge that would be the Department of Justice, and if they decided not to challenge it, then it would just go on by, and that's concerning. And then we add one layer on top of that, if I may, Congressman, is that with the Department of Justice, when you're dealing with the Civil Rights Division that would deal with these issues, they've now cut that division by 70%.
Right.
And so you have fewer attorneys that are there and able to be able to litigate these cases, and then you're going to then say that the organizations that were traditionally there to litigate these cases don't have the ability to do it. Well, that's a major issue.
Another big case.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for doing this. And there's so many people whom shoulders I stand on. I mean, one of them is right here. But all of these organizations, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Warriors Committee, I mean, we would not even have a shot at having a second majority Black district had it not been for those organizations.
That's right.
But it's beyond that. I never had a chance to meet Martin Luther King. I mean, he is the reason why we even have the Voting Rights Act. He worked so hard. But there's another person, and that is Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yes.
Who I have had an opportunity to meet and inspired me to, in fact, run for office.
Yes.
Who loves you?
And I love him just as much. But those people and organizations are the reason why
Yes.
We as black people
Yes.
have the opportunity that we have today and the political power that we have today. And I just want to thank them all.
Well, and I want to say thank you, and we look forward to you coming back next week. Daryl, Barbara, Congressman Fields have many more questions for you, and we're going to also ask you to send in questions. We want to educate, inform, and inspire. You have the power in your hand. I want to say Happy New Year. Thank you once again from Illinois' 1st Congressional District and Louisiana's 6th Congressional District. Thank you.
Thank you.